Hello, hi. So in today's video, we are going to discuss about currying in JavaScript. So currying is a concept with the help of which we can take flexible number of arguments and which also returns a function that can also take a flexible number of arguments. So today we are going to build something like this function where uh, flexiSum, which if called with the help of this, like this, should return the sum of the numbers. But if we call it somewhere like this, then it should also return the sum of the argument that have been provided into the function. So let's just look at the structure first. So the structure says that we can accept any number of arguments at any place in the given function. So if I would first, I would try to create a function which we need a wrapper on. For example, we would try to create a function called flexiSum, or maybe simple sum, because this is going to be wrapped. Now, in order to make sure that this works perfectly fine, we needed to make sure that um, this can take any number of arguments. So this is a way in JavaScript to spread the arguments that we are sending into a function. The name of the parameter is not important, but the syntax, where is three dot syntax, is important. This would collect all the arguments that we are providing to this function and add it into a list or a array. So right now what we need to do, we have to return a list, some of the arguments. So args dot reduce, in order to reduce the values, uh, previous and current, and we would return p plus c, something like this. So this is our flexible sum function that we have created. So if I would do something like this, 1 2 3 sum 1 2 3, it is going to give me a sum of all the functions, sum of all the arguments that we have provided. So now we have almost completed half of the problem, where we needed to make sure that the flexible inputs can be accepted. Now the drawback of current approach is we cannot use something like this, which is natural currying. So how do we make sure that this syntax also works like this? For that we need a wrapper of currying. So a kind of middleware that we needed to create. Okay, so we have created a curry that accept a function. What function? Of some function that we needed to provide. So the final function name would be curried sum, where curry would take sum as a wrapper. So now we would want this function to behave as a flexible uh, curry function, right? So now if we would call this curried sum like this, we would want it to work perfectly fine. So for that, what we need to do, we have to call a result, and we needed to print it. So in order to make sure that this kind of behavior works fine, how do JavaScript will know that, okay, so we have stopped providing the next number of arguments? Like, how would we make this syntax flexible? For that we have a workaround as well. So we needed to take care of that as well. So let's just create a variable called final sum, which would hold the value of the ultimate sum value. Okay, so now what we are going to do, we are going to return a curried from sum, a curried function, because a curry takes a function, right, and it returns a function that can be called, which means we needed to return a curried function. So we are just trying to handle a case where this syntax works just fine. So for example, we have created a curried function, and at the end we would return that curried function. So now this syntax is correct because we wrapped curry, right? We wrapped the sum function with the middleware function, right, and returns another function which is this. So this is now not syntactically incorrect, this is syntactically correct. So moving on, what we needed to do, first we will handle the problem in two different phases. So first phase would be to take a sum of these number of arguments, which means arguments will be coming here, right? And what we needed to do, we have to update the sum. So we have the arguments and we have to call the sum function, sum args, right? Okay, so what's the problem right now? So we call the result function, we call the current function, but in result we are we are returning nothing. So if we return final sum along with this will work the way this function worked directly. But now coming back to the difficult part is, how would we make sure that this syntax also works? Okay, to okay, so what do we need? So we need a recursion behavior here because we need to perform this kind of operation again and again until we are done. So how do we make sure this syntax also works? So in order to make sure this syntax also works, result needs to hold a function, which means instead of returning the final sum from curry, we needed to return a function. So let's just create a middleware function, middleware, right, which we needed to return. Okay, so we return the middleware function, which means now this syntax is syntactically correct, which means we are going to uh, accept this argument over here, which is arg. So if I would just do a console log arg, I should be able to see the 2. But how do we make sure that any number of argument is also accepted here? If I do 3, this is not going to be accepted. So what I can do is I could also spread this and make it as a args2, args2. Now if I notice that this, we have this, we have this, because with the help of closure we can access these values as well. These are somewhere here. So if I would do this, args1, args1, args1. Okay, so now because when we spread it, it is displayed like this, we needed to do it like this. Okay, now the difficult part, to find out the sum. Okay, so we have both the arguments. What we can do is we can just quickly update the final sum, which is sum args2 undefined. If I would do final sum, I have the sum of all the numbers that I have. So just to make it easy, I'll take two arguments. So 2 plus 1 is 3. Now 80% of the work is done. Our 80% of the work is done. But if I would want to do this also works. Want to do this? No, not really. So if we were provided, we expected the function to return 6, but now we are seeing, because this function returns nothing and we would want this to be repeated n number of times. So how do we make sure this works just fine? We return current. Okay, a different kind of problem. So when we return current, which is returning this function, in result we are now started seeing a middleware function, which is correct because when we called curried with 3, curried returns middleware, but we needed to print the value because we are done with providing arguments. So how do we do that? We are going to take care, we are going to took the help of one of the niche features of JavaScript. So if we look closely, everything in JavaScript is object, right? So if we are talking about object, how do browser prints the value of an object, right? For example, if I would print an object, this is displayed as object. So why does it display as object? Because when browser wanted to print something, it calls dot toString method of an object, right? So if I would, if this is a function, right, like this is a function, if I would define toString value of this object, which is a function, and I want whenever this is called, final sum should be printed. Okay, so if I would do this again, same result, because console log does not automatically call toString. It's the alert that calls toString. So if I would do this, you are now seeing the new result, which is 6. How would we make sure that console.log also returns the same thing? We call it explicitly. Now we are seeing 6. What if I do 4? Oh, a different kind of problem. Okay, and what if I would do this? Okay, this works just fine. This, not really. So what it is returning? It's returning curried. Now it is trying to call toString on curried function, which we don't have. So how do we do it? We define one more toString, something like this, and it also returns final sum. Okay, now if we see closely, we have make sure that our function becomes very flexible. So this is how you can create flexible sum functions the same way JavaScript implements in NewDate and other Lodash kind of libraries. I hope I was able to explain what curry is in details.